Yeah, if you want to go and review the minutes, and I guess we just did introductions, so um, I'm not sure if Dr. Nellis is with us, or if we want to go ahead and go with Sheriff McFadden's presentation.
Very good.
This is Ashley. I'm here just so everybody knows.
Oh, there you go. Oh, great. Sorry. Welcome, Dr. Nellis.
Good morning, Ashley. Good to see you.
Sure.
Thank you. Well, very good. Well, let's start with review of the minutes. The minutes were distributed from last week's meeting. Are there any comments, concerns, or questions regarding those minutes? Hearing none, seeing none, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mary.
This is Mike, I second.
Thank you, Mike. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And the minutes are approved. Thank you so much. Well, we do have an important series of presentations and discussions this morning. And as usual, time is of the essence. I apologize. Last week at the task force meeting, we ended up rushing through our presentation. Mary, thank you so much for what I thought was an incredible job reviewing the difficult and complicated issues related to the clemency recommendation. And I'll just say, I thought it was, I felt comfortable that we could have that quick treatment only because we had seen the offline discussion and there had been the poll results, the survey results, so that we sort of knew what questions and concerns had been raised, and we had addressed those questions and concerns. So I thought it was an area that we could move in expedited fashion. And as it turns out, that part was right. I thought there was real good and general consensus on that. Still, it would have been helpful, I think, for public edification to have a fuller presentation and discussion of it. But I thought the important points were made and made effectively. Thank you for that.
Well, I think none of us are, even if all these recommendations passed, I don't think any of us are done having to advocate for them, right? We have a lot that'll need to be done post commission report. So, yeah. Absolutely.
No, this is a partnership where we've got to stay in the struggle. These are important issues. Important stakeholders need to be heard. Their thoughts need to be added. And we're beginning this process here. Well, we're especially grateful to begin this morning with Dr. Ashley Nellis's presentation on Second Look Act. I'd intended to, in introductions, to show up Dr. Nellis's most recent book, or at least the book that I was most recently aware of, and it's called Life. It's in my other room. I'll bring it in before the end of the morning program, but it is and remains an important contribution to this discussion. And while it was not directly on point to the Second Look Act, it does describe the issue that we're struggling with, and that is how do we redress the issues of extreme sentencing, particularly those that were the result of the period of mass incarceration from the 80s and 90s. Dr. Nellis, with so little time for introductions, we invite you to present to the group on the Second Look Act. Thank you. Dr. Nellis.
Good morning, everybody. It's so great to be invited to join your very early morning meeting. And I'm already impressed. Thanks, Henderson, for asking me to talk a bit about our work on life imprisonment. I'll give a little bit of my own background on it, which is that I've been studying life sentences for about 12 years and with the Sentencing Project. And our work has focused on, providing a census regularly around the U.S. of the number of people serving life sentences, which we define as life with parole, life without parole, and terms of years, 50 years or more. Virtual life is what we call it. I'm having a little trouble with my internet, so I'm really hoping that this works out. But if someone could flag if you can no longer hear me or something, that would be great. So I have done work on this issue in North Carolina specifically, in terms of data analysis with a researcher at Duke, Brandon Garrett, who used to be at Virginia. And he is very interested in the issue of juvenile life without the possibility of parole, and also life with the possibility of parole there. In addition to the censuses that we've done, I've also done an analysis of juveniles through survey research of them back in 2012, interviewing about 1,600 of the then 2,500 around the US. And that analysis was used in the Supreme Court ruling of Miller v. Alabama, and subsequently Montgomery v. Louisiana, which invalidated life without parole for mandatory life sentences for juveniles. So there's a lot more work to be done, of course, implementing that for one thing, and also moving beyond both life without parole and juveniles. So I wanted to give you a little bit of the picture in North Carolina and what we see as potential progress in some states in implementing Second Look. So our idea comes from a book that I co-authored with Mark Maurer called The Meaning of Life, which Henderson referenced, the case for abolishing life sentences. And we make the pitch to max all sentences at 20 years, and that the assumption without with only few exceptions would be to put a minimum mandatory maximum of 20 years imprisonment. So that has been proposed in a few jurisdictions, New York, Pennsylvania, DC, and Maryland, and Texas rather. And so far it hasn't passed yet, but the legislation in DC looks promising, and it is restricted to people who were under the age of 25 at the time of their crime. The idea is based just generally on the belief that everybody should be given a second look who's in for a long time, and they should get that second look at around 15 years, with the idea that at 20 years, they should be ready for release, and that at 15 years, the board, the judge, the sentencer should have a sense of how things are coming along and whether they are ready for release in the next 5 years, barring any major changes. So that would have a tremendous impact if it were to be implemented here in North Carolina. And I'll give you a sense of how many people are serving life sentences for those who don't know, by sharing my screen briefly with you all. If you just give me a moment to get a sense of, give that to you. All right, so let me share my screen. And you can see here that life with the possibility of parole has gone from, and these are stock counts, this top one. So in 1995, there were 3,000 people serving life with the possibility of parole, and that has come down to 1,700 in 2020. In 1995, which I don't know if that was the first year life without parole was implemented. I study all the states, so sometimes I get them confused, but North Carolina only gave me 1995 and forward. So it looks like there were about 0 in 95. So I'm guessing that's when they implemented life without parole. It has increased up to about the same point, about 1,600. So there has been a much more rapid rise in life without parole than there has been a decline in life with parole. But altogether, there's about 1,500 plus 1,700, so about over 3,000 people serving life sentences. And this does not include people with 50 years or more, which I have somewhere as well. Then underneath here is the sentences. So these are, let's say, new admissions to life without the possibility of parole and new admissions to death row over the last, since 1985. And so you can see that life without parole has been increasing, adding about 70 people to the prison population with new life without parole sentences in the past recent years, let's say since 2005 or so. So it's a thriving sentence, and it is causing a lot of buildup in the North Carolina prison population, these long-term sentences of life and life without. I don't know offhand when your first parole hearing is with a life with parole sentence, but I'm guessing it's somewhere around 25 years. But that would just be a guess based on national standards. I could easily find it. I just don't have it in my mind at the moment. Maybe somebody on the screen has it. So what has been the idea in other jurisdictions has been to focus on, shortening that time to a more reasonable period of time that one could expect change. And some of the ways people have gone about that is to limit it to crimes that exclude murder, crimes that exclude sex offenses, crimes that exclude adults, or crimes where the person was not the trigger, was not the triggerman. So, and there are other, ways that states have sort of carved out people from this second look. Our approach, at a first take would be not to do carve-outs, because that does make it more difficult for people down the road. And we have a fundamental belief that people can change, and so that all people can change. Some of the big obstacles that we see in implementing second look come from the victims' rights community, which is a very big player in anywhere we look. And so a way around this is to try to include victims' families at the beginning, and try to change the narrative around the role that victims can play, and also that the criminal justice system can play in bringing about healing, and making healing part of justice. I don't know specifically where North Carolina is. I'm excited to hear that that your task force is taking a look at this. I think North Carolina is a state that could really benefit from a second look bill, because you have so many people serving life sentences, and you have a growing population of them, and you have a prison population that is very large. But I don't know, and I'm not on the ground there, so I don't know what it would take. If there would be just a, an introductory bill this year, or what. I will say just in closing that North Carolina is also a state that, is at the top nationwide in terms of its racial disparities in the implementation of life sentences. And that is, considering the fact that its general prison population also has racial disparities. So even given that, the life sentences are about 2/3 people of color, mostly African American. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have about the North Carolina population of people who might be eligible for second look. A second look that looked primarily at life imprisonment, or any other questions that you have. Does that about cover it, Henderson? I think you're muted, or maybe my internet has gone on.
No, that was me. I was muted. Thank you, Dr. Nellis. We're grateful for that overview. I'll look to Ben and Ms. Ishii if there's a quick question or two, but we do plan for the second half of this meeting to be a more fulsome discussion. And so there may well be questions that come up during that session. I would note that you raised the question of one of the critical stakeholders, and that is the group of harmed parties, victims. And I would say that I've had, just over the course of the last couple of weeks, a couple of very important exchanges with family members who are survivors of crime, of violent crimes and murder. And one of the assurances that I gave, and I think that the task force is committed, is the identification of that stakeholder community as core to this process. I'm thinking of the courageous and insightful letter from Bridget Kitfer and the conversations with her and her family that followed. I'm thinking of Yolanda Thomas and her contributions regarding her family's experience. These are all critically important voices that would, of course, be heard and be part of both the recommendations and any follow-up policies that are enacted here. But thank you for setting the table, Dr. Nellis. Greatly appreciate that. In the way of quick transitions, we're going to invite the comments and the remarks of Sheriff McFadden, who is one of the nation's most impressive and successful investigators of homicides, of murders. He brought those decades of experience to the position that he now holds as the elected sheriff of Mecklenburg County. And in the course of both his current position and his years with the police department, he was in close proximity to family members who survived violent crime, close proximity to offenders who committed violent crimes. And it gives Sheriff McFadden an incredible, insightful position to share. Sheriff McFadden. And I believe you are on mute.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I try to make sure that who knows me, I speak with a lot of passion. So I'm trying to get through this morning. And I have come a long way in 40 years. Next July, I will have my 40th year in as law enforcement. And so when we're talking about issues like this, I know it very well from both inside and outside. And I was honored to come to you speak to you today. So I'm trying to prepare this message that I need to give to you. So I am the sheriff here in Mecklenburg County. I'm a proud graduate of Johnson C. Smith University, and I graduated in 1982. After graduating, I spent only 2 days of freedom, as someone says. I graduated on Sunday, and then I joined the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department on Tuesday. So after joining Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, I had a great career. I loved working, but for anybody who knows me, this is not a career, this is actually my calling. And as a law enforcement officer since the 90s, I've been involved in thousands and thousands of cases. I had to look back and look in these boxes last night to make sure that I get the correct analogy of what I'm doing. And I found out I had thousands and thousands of cases, countless and countless hours with victims' families, and also the people who've caused harm to victims here in our city. And in doing that, you know, I had to make sure that I speak kind of for both sides, because now I have the task of housing men and women here at the detention center, which we do not say jail. We try to create a definite different terminology. So we don't say jail and we don't say inmate, we say residents. So spending hours with these men and women, I've learned a lot, and countless hours with the families. But then here's the unbelievable. I remain close to both the victims' families and also the family members who's caused harm. I mean, families who family members cause harm. And I know that's unusual, but that was my style of working. And that helped me to become a successful homicide detective. And, you know, I'm here in the great state of North Carolina, and I had to remember that I have served almost 40 years. So I come from a unique perspective. And then I also look at how I was rewarded, and understanding that the FBI has awarded me many awards. Charlotte Police Department has offered me many awards, even the Charlotte Observer, NAACP. One award that I really hold closely is when President Obama invited me to the White House to ask me to speak to over 200 law enforcement officers about how to bring change to the community between law enforcement and also the community. So I'm very happy to say that I was invited to the White House by President Obama to, you know, to try to bring change to the community and bring community closer to law enforcement, and law enforcement closer to community. But we're the third largest city or county I'm the third largest law enforcement agency in the state of North Carolina. I'm hoping to be number one day, but right now I'll take number 3, but we are the largest sheriff's office in the state. I have about 1,400 men and women here. I have a budget of about $108 million. And don't want anybody to take any money from me. We still need more money. But I'm committed. I'm committed to this work. And it has absolutely been demonstrated for the years of commitment throughout the community and my career that I stay in the community and I listen to the people and I listen to the voices. And it has provided me a very successful outcome. And believe it or not, I have about a 90% clearance rate in homicides. So that means I've had not the honor, but I had the task of bringing justice to families to court. And so to put that in perspective, over 35 years in law enforcement, just think about Baltimore has a clearance rate of 32%, and Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department has a rate of about 64%. And so then I think that I'm well ahead of the game and have the ability to close cases because I have great ties with the community. And we just lost one of those ties, Mrs. Judy Williams, who was one of the co-founders of MOMO, which is Mothers of Murdered Offspring. And she just passed, and believe it or not, in preparing this today, I realized that Mrs. Williams helped me clear my first homicide case by providing me some information that helped me close the case. So then, but we still stay in contact with those families, and the families trust me, and even the victim's family, and including the family's members who cause harm, still trust me. And so I think that's a unique perspective that we have. But now coming into this new part of my career as the sheriff, I have a different perspective. But I have firsthand knowledge because of my decades of working with people. And so when the commission asked me to talk about this, I had no problem about it. But we're talking about incarceration of people who no longer poses, I guess, risk to the community or public interest. And we have to look at that very carefully. And I know Mr. Hill saw me with a young man not long ago that helped me change my perspective. And research also shows us that sometimes people cause crime, or we may make a mistake in saying that they cause crime and sentence them to longer sentence that brings about a lot of harm. And so then we have to understand that someone who commits a crime at an early age, and by the time they reach 30 years old, has that risk dropped. Because we all know, and I think the doctors and everybody can talk about the human brain when we're younger and how do we develop. And I know even me now, I develop a little bit better than I did in my younger years. And then we talk about the recklessness and the taking the risk and the vulnerability and the negative influence that push some of these people to these limits that we don't actually bring out during the time that it comes to court. And I can say that honestly, because I know when interviewing people, it was very easy to allow someone to say that I have committed a crime or how they committed a crime. But then when you get into really, why did it happen? And sometimes, at a younger age, they really cannot express how it happened, why it happened, because I think because of their brain hasn't developed that much to say, let me form this opinion. And that's just me speaking from, interviewing a lot of people over the years and hundreds of people. But I think even the United States Supreme Court recognizes how the brain continues to develop from the 20s, into your 30s. So as a homicide detective for this length of time, I've seen both sides, and even with the teens of the young men. And earlier this year, like I said, I had the privilege of meeting a young man by the name of, and I hate to say it, Mr. Kente Lee. He committed a crime when he was 14 years old. And, the district attorney here argued for Mr. Kente Lee's case, and he served 20 years or more. And then he was released. And believe it or not, I was at the door when he was released. I gave him a suit when he was released. And we had a conversation after he was released. And actually, Mr. Lee is now living in Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama. I had the fortunate experience to travel to Alabama and was talking to some other people about sentencings and the laws and where we're going in the United States. And I had this great dinner with Mr. Lee. And I know that sounds kind of odd, but that's just the way some people say, as we roll, we went to talk and we had a great conversation, but it showed me that he came a long way. And after spending 20 some years in prison, he had a long way to go, but simply that he was willing to do it. We spent a lot of time. Since that time, I haven't even invited Mr. Lee back here to the detention center to speak to the men that he left behind, and also to the juveniles to encourage them on what they need to do to continue their lives. So simply seeing a man who committed a crime and allowing him to spend, he was allowed to spend time here without life and parole and exited. And now I strongly believe, he's going to be a productive young man in society. And I can tell you that I'm going to invite Mr. Lee back here to speak to my men and hopefully my young men. And you have to understand that this is a man who committed a crime, which was a homicide, the things that I investigated for many years, but I'm inviting him back here to help me. And I believe that was a great opportunity for me. And
Sheriff, if I can just make one point of clarification, and I think it came up in your subsequent remark, but his original sentence was a life without parole sentence.
Yes.
And which was imposed for the crime that was committed at age 14.
Correct.
And Dr. Nellis had described Miller and Graham as decisions of the Supreme Court that influenced that. And those decisions, as well as other information that sort of brought in his background, his adjustment in the institution, the folks who had worked with him at local churches and support groups that had gotten to know him. All of that was brought to the attention of the prosecution and of the court, which was very important in persuading them that a more appropriate sentence was something other than life without parole, was indeed the 20 years that he had already spent in prison. I just want to make that clarification. And I know that you have more to say about your experience with redemption. I didn't mean to.
No, that's great.
That. Thank you.
And you know, it's kind of unique because, and I'm glad you brought that out, because Mr. Lee knew about me, and I hate to say anything about my reputation, but you know, Mr. Lee at the age of 14, when he was being interviewed by some of my counterpartners with Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department at the time, in having a discussion with Mr. Lee here, he told me, he asked, was I working that night? You know, and I don't know why, but he said, you know, he would have loved to have the opportunity to talk to me and allow me to listen to his story. And then in our conversation during that time, he said, you know, being here or wherever he was at the time, he saw that I may have a chance to be elected as sheriff. And he said he could remember many people who were gathered around the TV looking at these elections of sheriffs and other law enforcement. He said it was kind of amazing to him, several people on that side of the bridge was cheering for me to become sheriff. But now I understand that much better because, you know, I get the opportunity to help change lives and help people, you know, who didn't get sentenced to life without parole. And I know that sounds kind of unusual for a young man like myself who's coming from that background. But then I had the opportunity through a great institute called Vera Institute to send me to Germany and Norway, you know, in 2019 to look at the men and women who are incarcerated there. And I think no one there participated in any sentences more than 20 years. And I remember talking to this young man and my last day there, and we were inside of his room. And he always, you know, we had a great conversation for about 4 or 5 hours, and we were back and forth. And looking at the lifestyle was very unusual because it wasn't in the system that we have here, was in a different system. And, you know, something he said that always would stick with me. He says, you are someone's hope. Know that when you walk into that building to be the sheriff, you are someone's hope and you're going to bring something different. And so it made me understand very much differently in talking to Mr. Kente Lee, that now I understand my calling and why I was here. And so then, you know, for me, it's firsthand knowledge. It's not something that I had to read about or study about. And then we have to look at the European style, you know, and the Germany style. You know, it's 20 years or 15 years. And I have to add to that, during the COVID crisis, when we have to become creative about this, and I'll be glad to share this with you all later, we became creative on a lot of things we did. And, you know, we had a book club, and then we had a book review and everything else. But my women here started talking about, is incarceration rehabilitation or punishment? So we had a debate about it, a full-blown 4-hour debate about it. And we had a debate team, which, you know, looked at this, and I'll be happy to share that with you all, because from their perspective, they want rehabilitation to become better citizens and have that ability to be released one day and be productive citizens, instead of being inside a cell and being withered away by our criminal justice system. And I had to take a look at that. And it was very interesting that they brought a perspective from it. But you have to understand that, you know, I understand the victim sides, if you will, that you know, what they're going to say. But I think sometimes we need to have these two systems meet, the victim sides of the system and also the person who's caused harm, you know, to have them meet to see what they can really come up with, or how rehabilitation is better than having someone pushed away. And, you know, if that's my calling, I would love to be more involved. But, you know, do we make society a better society? And do we help people to be more productive instead of just housing them away? Yeah. And, you know, we have to talk about the criminal justice system. Are these sentences too long? Do we fail the victims, and do we fail the person who's being sentenced to that? And of course, you know, I've been on both sides with these families and talked to these families all across America and in the United States and here in Charlotte. So when we talk about the Second Look Act, which is a remedy of a failed system, and I say the failed system because, believe it or not, I have been on both sides. And, you know, I was talking to Mr. Hill about, you know, doing my tenure between CMPD and the sheriff's office. I had the opportunity to look at a case where a young man was sentenced for a very long sentence at a crime that he never committed. And he spent 17 and a half years in prison for a crime he absolutely didn't commit. And what really was amazing to me, I had to go up against one of my counterpartners in this city in Greensboro, somebody I thought very highly of and was a very great detective. But at the end of the day, some of the evidence wasn't brought out. And then we found out that the young man who was sentenced to this long sentence absolutely did not commit the crime. And then we found out through some DNA analysis that another person had committed the crime and had already served time and was in prison, but got out. And then, you know, doing a time, he became involved in an accident and he died in the accident. So then we have to talk about, is it clear that the victim has done all of these? I mean, the person who caused these crimes has done all of these things. So I think we have to look at it. And then we have to also look at the people of color who's being sentenced as long sentence than anyone else. And I can tell you that I've seen a lot more than people can ever imagine on these. And then how frequently that the members of the Black community or members of communities of colors are frequently sentenced disproportionately different from other races. And so we have to look at that. And something that really stuck out in my mind, and when we were talking, do we ever give these men and women or encourage them to express remorse? Or do they have a chance to express remorse? And can they look back and come and help build something better than we have? And I think this is a part that we can look at the second look at saying, can we take different steps in saying, can we address this? And can we have these conversations to where we maybe, without question, take the death penalty off the case? Because I had an experience in Georgia that a young man was sentenced to death in Georgia, and I had the time to spend with the family of both sides because I was working for the NAACP at the time, you know, in helping them understand, you know, the prison systems and everything else and where we're putting our dollars. And this young man named Troy, and we were talking about him being sentenced to death. And I had to go to Georgia and make sure that everything was in line for the families to arrive to watch this young man be sentenced to death. But then I also had the chance to prepare the families for his death. And, you know, it's taking a different look at it. So I think that looking at the system for the death penalty, we need to look at it closely. And I know that sounds harshly coming from my perspective, but I think that is something that we need to fairly look at and see if we're doing the right things. And
Sheriff, I'm going to stop you there for a couple of reasons. One, because of the clock.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But the other is it touches on something that I've heard from harmed families and victim families. And that is that there is common ground on one failure of the system. And that is to find that space where real acts of contrition, real acts of remorse can be invited and encouraged in the system. And this search for finding a way in which redemption becomes a key goal of the system is a struggle. And that has come from expressions from victim families. It's also come from expressions of offenders. And I know we haven't asked Commissioner Ishii to address this at this point. But I have gotten communications about a very promising program up in Craggy. I think it's called Bridges to Life or something like that. That the facility there is working with community members to encourage just that kind of exchange. It's that kind of experimental project that I think is that holds such good promise. But thank you, Sheriff McFadden.
I'm just very passionate about this, and but I think that we do need that time for families to allow, simply stand up in court and looking back to the family and said, I'm sorry, in a very emotional time. There's no justice on each side. And let me just say that. And I think that if there is a program that we can create that, even if we create it here inside the detention center or while doing my tenure as sheriff, I'll be glad to be a part of that, to move that vehicle forward.
I am so appreciative of those remarks. And I know that this working group is, and the task force truly appreciates your experience and your sharing this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mercedes, I wanted to transition to this important part of the program, and I know we've got Commissioner Ishii and Mr. Fenholt and the other members of the Department of Public Safety, and we may have broadened just a wee bit the discussion points. But Mercedes, if you could take charge of the conversation of where we are with the recommendations that that we've been working in prison discipline. And there's been a good bit of offline conversations and contributions and modifications. So if you can bring that discussion up to date, and we invite the insights and the experience of our guests to join in. Mercedes?
Yes, thank you. So we may jump ahead a couple of slides, and we'll go back to the slides that Commissioner Ishii shared with us. I have taken the language after some discussions that was presented at the last meeting regarding our prison discipline recommendations, and modified them a little bit in such a way that we have them under these 5 categories at this point. Reforming solitary confinement, restrictive housing, enhancing prison personnel, increasing funding for mental health services and programs in prisons, increasing due process protections for people accused of infractions, and protecting pregnant individuals in jails and prisons. That 5th one needs a lot of development still. So we've heard a lot about reforming restrictive housing during our last presentation. We had some discussion with the Department of Public Safety, and we know that they have, so I'm going to go back a couple of slides now, and so I can turn it over to Commissioner Ishii really quick, because I know that there's a lot of work being done in this arena, and there's a lot of work that coincides with the recommendations that we're making. Strategic plan and things of that sort. So I want to give the Department of Public Safety an opportunity to present and speak on the topic, and we can ask questions and have a discussion from there, and delve in to the specific details, recommendations after the discussion from with DPS. So Commissioner Ishii.
All right, well, good afternoon. Thank you everyone for allowing me and our team to have some time with you this morning. We're excited to overview some of our progresses that we are making, and we are also very appreciative of the work that this task force is doing and the supportive recommendations that you're working on. I haven't met too many of you, so I wanted to just introduce myself really quickly. I started in corrections in 1989. And as a correction officer, and served 29 years in the Ohio prison system before joining DPS here in North Carolina in June of 2019. So I'm, believe it or not, coming up on my 1.5-year anniversary here in North Carolina, and love it. And it's been a great experience so far. We've been very, very busy. COVID is challenging our prison system in ways that we've never been challenged before. But one thing I wanted to share with the committee, we're pleased to let you know that our prison population in January stood at 34,455. And as of this morning, our incarcerated population is down to 30,400. So the DPS team has been working very hard to reduce the population, reduce density during COVID, and we believe that we have significantly impacted that to the tune of almost 4,000 incarcerated men and women. So I wanted to give you guys, I know you've been working very hard, and wanted to share with you some of our plans and how they came to be and where we go, because many of those touch on the work of this group. Last fall, we engaged in 2 large strategic planning sessions. We had almost 600 staff from across the prison system participate. We had administrative staff, we had wardens, we had nurses, we had mental health professionals and maintenance professionals and correction officers and custody supervisors. So a very, very diverse group came together for 2 days to work on our 5-year plan. You know, what do we want to get done over the next 5 years? And the group did outstanding. And you'll see on the screen, our strategic plan was published not too long ago for our next 5 years. And we've put a link here that it's publicly available. So we've got a link there for everyone to see. But I think it touches on many of the items that this group is working on. So one of the things that it touches on, which is a major underpinning for our future, is our commitment to accreditation system-wide for all 55 of our prisons to become accredited, and our 2 health hospitals to become accredited by a healthcare accrediting organization. So the American Correctional Association is the gold standard for prisons and jails across the country, and we are committed to becoming an accredited prison system. ACA, under its current 5th edition, has almost 600 standards that we will comply with, and they are very far-reaching. They deal with human resource issues, prison security, prison construction and design and maintenance, offender disciplinary process, restrictive housing, food services. It goes on and on, but it's a very, very comprehensive process where 3 external correction professionals from outside of North Carolina will come in and conduct a 3-day audit of our facility and audit us against the 600 standards. And once that initial accreditation is achieved, they visit us every 3 years. So it's an ongoing process that we believe will certainly make our prison system better. So I know you guys are working on restrictive housing, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Our process with restrictive housing right now is under review. We've empaneled a restrictive housing implementation team that is again represented by staff from across our state. We've got four regions within our prison system. All 4 regions are represented, and again, we've got a very diverse group of staff: correction officers, health professionals, mental health professionals, supervisors, unit management, wardens that are working on how do we transition our current policy and processes to comply with ACA's 5th edition standards. That also includes the offender disciplinary process to make sure that there are due process protections as the offenders navigate through that process. So that work is underway. It is no small task, believe me. This will be transformative and change how we not only manage our restrictive housing population, but also administer the offender disciplinary process when necessary. Wanted to highlight a couple things that we're excited about and seeing some early returns on. In May, we put in place an incentive program for the offenders to be rewarded for good behavior. So currently offenders throughout the prison system, with some exceptions, those that are serving life without parole and those that are in restrictive housing, but they can earn 4 days of sentence reduction credits per month if they do not get any trouble. So no infractions, 4 days of sentence reduction credits to get them toward their minimum every month. And what that has done in the early months is reducing the number of infractions of our 30,000 men and women. About 21,000 every month are earning these 4 days. And then if you add that up over the course of a year, there is a significant opportunity to reduce your stay in prison. We have a phase 2 with that we're working on that is very close to going in. We are working with our computer programmers, but a very similar program for those that are in restrictive housing that can earn time off that sentence. So you can earn your way back into general population quicker, and we are excited. We think this is going to be ready within the next 60 days to launch, but very similar kind of parallels, good behavior, you get out of restrictive housing earlier. A couple things that we are in the process of standing up that kind of go hand in hand with ACA and our commitment to reform is we've hired a director of standards and performance. And this will be a brand new section within the prison's hierarchy that will basically be committed to quality assurance. We are going to not only ask ACA to come in and check us against standards, we're going to check ourselves. So that director is going to lead a massive quality assurance effort that will span all across our system, again, touching security and food service and health and restrictive housing, and also the offender disciplinary process. Within that, we are in the process of hiring an administrator for the North Carolina Prisons Innovation Institute. I'm really excited about this section as it develops. We've kind of benchmarked with many of our universities and colleges across the country who have used this Innovation Institute concept to keep them on the cutting edge. Well, we're going to do that here in our prison system in North Carolina. This group will monitor, we've got a series of key performance indicators that will monitor some of our key metrics. The Innovation Institute is also going to keep us on the front end. They are going to be committed to researching best practices within prisons and jails across the country and flooding us with good ideas so that we can be the best prison system that we can. And I think our state is going to enjoy great benefit by having an Innovation Institute. So we flashed up on the screen the information for the 5th edition standards. We are currently working on this now. We have 4 ACA audits scheduled for November. So this is our first step into this. I'm very excited. We are starting with the agency headquarters. We are going to be audited. ACA has another complete set of standards for the administration of correctional agencies. And November 18th, we are going to be audited against those standards and then move into, we've got 1 prison and 2 of our correction enterprises that will be audited by the end of November of this year. Another project that ties in really closely with restrictive housing is this summer we were able to put in place an agreement with our phone company vendor, Telephones, that is going to drastically expand our phone contract, and we're very excited about this. This will bring a tablet or an iPad type computer device to every offender in our prison system, including those that are in restrictive housing. We think this is going to be transformative. The tablet is also a telephone. Every offender will have their own telephone. Right now, we fight a battle with offenders extorting other offenders for phone time. That will eliminate that because everybody will have their own telephone. the offenders will be able to access some leisure time activities, music and movies that they can purchase. But our main driver for this was this is going to significantly impact the amount of programming that we are able to push to the offender population. We think we are going to over quadruple the amount of rehabilitative programming that is offered to every offender, including those in restrictive housing. Now, the restrictive housing tablets, the content may be a little bit different than the men and women enjoy in general population, but they will have access to a tablet for the primary purpose in restrictive housing of programming, you know, and completing programs while you're in restrictive housing is going to, again, earn your way back into general population much quicker than you normally do. We've got Dr. Gary Junker and Assistant Commissioner Harris with us to take a deeper dive into some of our diversionary units. We have therapeutic diversion units, restrictive housing diversion units, and we have a SRG or a gang diversion program, all three that we are very proud of. These are not new programs in North Carolina. Some have been in operation since 2017 and 2018. You know, I've worked at a number of agencies across the country, and I can tell you that these three models that North Carolina has are among the best in the business. And not every state or corrections jurisdiction has those. We're very proud of them. They were put together utilizing significant evidence. So they are evidence-based models. And we're very proud. And as you look through our strategic plan expansion.
Commissioner Ishii, I'm going to interrupt you, but I am so grateful for these comments. I never thought I'd be excited by anything coming from the Commissioner of Prisons, but you've excited. I think your discussion of the tablet and how that can change both restrictive housing and the general population and a sense of community, I think it's important and it's forward looking. I did want to take just advantage of the moments we've got left. You mentioned the CRT program, the gang intervention program. I am certainly not an expert, and I would defer to Ben Fintholt and Mary Pollard about this, but the task force did get some communication regarding the difficulty of offenders being able to renounce any prior affiliation with gangs. And once getting the label of gang affiliation, you know, that's like a life sentence. And it sort of prevents the kind of redemption and remorse, movements towards remorse and turnaround. And if you or Ms. Harris can address quickly anything that you're doing to sort of turn that problem around, I'd be anxious to hear.
Sure, I can give you a quick overview, and that is under review currently. We've got another team that is reviewing our gang program, and we are excited. Our gang program is not really a renunciation program. I've visited the unit twice now, and it is more a heavy dose of programming to that has the offenders look at life choices. So they are not required to renounce gang membership. They are encouraged to make good choices that will help them, you know, throughout their period of incarceration, but also, you know, returning back and leading a productive life. But, you know, I agree with you that, you know, we have a process to become a validated gang member. You know, we're looking for ways where you can earn your way to become unvalidated, because I think our offenders that are in this have to have some sense of hope that there's a way out, because I think we probably would all agree that, you know, a 20-year-old gang member, by the time they turn 40 or 45 or just age in any way, sometimes make different choices and want to take a different path in life. So that is part of our strategic plan as well. But the program's really neat. You know, you go in and it's really got three main phases that are divided into two. So there's 6 phases, but the the phase 1 and 2, the men that are in the program are generally a little bit angry and frustrated, and I don't know about this. I don't think I want to be here. It's a 9-month program, so you get into the mid-months and you walk into those units and the guys are saying, this isn't too bad. It's all right. And then you get into that last third, and it's amazing the comments that you hear from the men. They say, thank you, I needed this. I'm looking at myself very much differently. So we're really proud of the program value, and it is transformative. But we are also looking at some kind of an aftercare program, because one of the challenges we've identified with the SRG offenders is they're doing really well when they're released from the program. They go back into general population and sometimes slip because they're right back into, in some cases, that environment of pressure. So we are also looking for some kind of an aftercare program where we can keep recharging that battery.
Commissioner, we could probably listen to some of these stories all morning, all day, but the members here have been confined, and I haven't heard from any of them this morning. So I'm really need to open up the floor and have the members feel free to ask you, ask Dr. Nellis, Sheriff McFadden, any questions or share comments regarding any of the thoughts or the presentations made this morning.
I have a question or a thought. Thank you, Commissioner Ishii. I was able to review your strategic plan when it was released over the summer, and there were some really, I think, positive things in there. I'm kind of thinking, we're addressing racial disparities here, and is there some way that we can ask the department to report on how your efforts result in lessening of racial disparities in either imposition of infractions or of folks living in restrictive housing? In other words, how can we know in a year or 2 years if any of this is helping with that particular issue?
Sure, we would be happy to share that. We are a publicly funded agency, and our interest is to be transparent. And those are metrics we're going to monitor. We're going to hold ourselves to those, but absolutely sharing those will not be a problem.
Thank you.
And Henderson, if I may, one of the things that struck me when Mr. Ishii initially began talking was that that 4 days a month that people can get for good behavior is not available to people who have LWOP. And I think that ties directly into what Ms. Nellis was saying. That's one of the problems with sending people into prison and then giving them no hope of ever coming out. I actually think this is one area in which, say, an attorney from Prisoner Legal Services and a person from the prison system would see directly eye to eye, because we both want the person to have hope. We both want them to have incentives, and LWOP doesn't give them any incentives, and it makes DPS's job harder. It makes everybody's job harder. And I think that that's a key link between the two presentations we've heard today.
Thank you, Ben.
I agree with you, and finding something productive and something that provides hope for men and women that are serving life sentences is critical to our formula of prison safety, both for our staff and our offenders. So we are committed to, and I've talked to a number of lifers and let them know that we are absolutely committed to including them and their needs and interests in part of our overall reform efforts.
The only question I had, Mr. Ishii, was you mentioned, you talked about the benefits of the repudiation, or I'm not sure what the label is, but the gang program. And my question was not about the content, but about the availability. The thing that I hear over and over is, I'd love to do that, I can't get in.
I agree with you. And we are going to expand that program one way or another. It may require us applying for additional funding from the General Assembly through the budget process. But I think this program is highly impactful, and we have got to expand that if we are going to make our prisons and communities safer. So that is certainly part of our blueprint for the future. I think it's a great program.
And how many spots, how many sort of spots are there in the program right now?
Right now, there's about 160.
And is that at one facility or multiple facilities?
Currently at one.
Which is that? Is it still at Foothills?
Yes.
Okay, so 160 folks at a time, but you got to be able to get in. Like if Foothills is full, for example, can people get into that program if there aren't beds open at Foothills generally?
It is, we just kind of have a waiting list. So they usually transfer in when a bed opens up.
And if someone's trying to get into Foothills for a non-gang related reason, I mean, I guess what I'm wondering is if the person wants to get into that program at Foothills, would they maybe be not able to because someone else wants to get into Foothills for a different reason?
No, they're dedicated beds. So when a gang program bed comes open, that's where the waiting list. So if there's others that are trying to get into other beds at Foothills, that they kind of operate independently.
And do you know how long is the waiting list currently?
That I don't know, sir. I can follow up with you. I'll get it and send you an email. Okay.
Thanks.
I pulled up the recommendations as they stand. We're running out of time, so I want to pull us back to the working group, the recommendations here. I'm going to, if it's okay.
I'm afraid, Mercedes, we may be out of time to do that at this meeting.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to send these out via survey.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
And so if you keep your eye open for a survey on this, and then also I'm going to be sending around some final language that Judge Clark and I worked on regarding the fines and fees recommendations. There are some substantive changes, but I'm trying to avoid sending that out to the working group for another survey. So I'd really ask if you guys could, I'm going to send that link right after this meeting. If you could look at those changes, add any comments if you see appropriate. And then those recommendations will be going to the task force for survey and then for input and comment. So I'm going to share here the next steps. I just talked about them. Again, we're going to hopefully get an email to you guys after this meeting asking you to approve some final changes. And then that recommendation is going to go to the task force. These recommendations that we just discussed today, some of them regarding prison discipline will be going out to you all for your input to see which ones we can proceed with pushing forward. And then
on that last one, Mercedes, let's change that from survey to what we will do is distribute a draft templates to the working group on Second Look Act and on death penalty. I think we're just not at the stage for the survey, but I think we'll get those templates out. I know that I've drafted up a template on the death penalty. I think Dr. Nellis, your presentation was helpful this morning. It's given us food for thought. And I'll try to draft up, or Mercedes, you and I can work on that draft for the Second Look Act.
Henderson, can I ask Dr. Nellis a question right quick?
Absolutely.
So you mentioned DC, Pennsylvania, maybe a couple of others where you've proposed legislation and hadn't gone anywhere. Have there been other jurisdictions where you have made some progress on this issue? You mentioned the carve out. I don't know if I just wanted you to comment on that. I mean, it seems to me that there may be some things that we could look at short of the whole hog, such as maybe having the parole commission look at certain categories of offenders at the 20-year mark and maybe make a recommendation to a judicial officer. Mary and I have had this conversation about what's the interplay. These are valid sentences that were handed down and juries convicted and they were sentenced. And so do you need to have a judicial officer involved in any alteration of that sentence, and at what point a review would be reasonable. So there's a lot right there. What's going on around the country? Anything?
So around the country, there's those 4 or 5 jurisdictions where they've introduced. I would say the closest one to passage is in DC. That does have a carve out. It's for people under 25 years old. You know, I think maybe one recommendation would be to look at the data for North Carolina, which I would be happy to do, and see if there's a, you know, constellation of lifers that are in under a particular statute, or that are in for, you know, sort of less egregious. I don't know what your habitual offender law is, and how many lifers are in for that. So that would be one way to go about it, sort of strategically, even though, you know, ideally we'd like a second look for everybody. You know, of course, the juveniles, there's a lot of juveniles serving life with the possibility of parole in North Carolina. And now a lot more now that JLWOP is invalidated. And so it could expand the juvenile. I mean, I have a number of ideas. I would say in terms of passage, California's law would be the most progressive, and that you know, provides a second look for everybody based on certain conditions. So I don't know if a follow-up is helpful, where I can sort of lay some of this out for you guys.
It would be helpful. It would be helpful for me, and also if we could make sure that the victims' rights community is involved in that discussion. I think that would be helpful also.
Okay, sure.
Dr. Nellis, I'd definitely love to work with you offline in Henderson as well, and we can formulate some language to that.
Mary?
I just think it would be worthwhile spending more working group time at a future meeting talking about this, because I think a lot of us have a lot of ideas, and there are other stakeholders who need to be brought in, and we are kind of pressed for time today, so I'm hoping we are getting together again, and that we can revisit this.
If you can send me who it is that you'd like to hear from.
Absolutely. Well, I think Judge Thornburg mentioned the victims folks, and I think I'd like to hear more. I think Mr. Finholt has a lot of data about, you know, I have a particular interest, I think, in young people who are 18, 19, 20 years old who committed maybe a string of armed robberies or other types of offenses. They get boxcars, and boxcar, they're serving basically a de facto life, and how do we get a second look? So I have to log off because I have to drive down to the legislature. I'll see you all next time. Sorry. Bye-bye.
I'll just say that Mary's last comment seems to be a recurring theme. It's the 19-year-old with a string of armed robberies, sometimes with a toy gun, that results in a life sentence. But you know, this has been a fascinating morning. Thank you, Dr. Nellis. Thank you, Sheriff McFadden, Commissioner Ishii, Ms. Bradshaw, and Dr. Junker. What a tremendous morning. A lot of work to do. And Mercedes and I will be back in touch with those next steps and the distribution of things for you to review. I'm not sure you all counted on having this much work outside the working group meetings, but it's been so very productive, and there's more of that to come. Thank you again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.